Welcome back to the LEADr podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joel Brown. I'd like to approach a topic today. The topic is creativity, and I think creativity is a catalyst. Think about the last time you solved a problem that had no obvious answer. A conversation you had to read carefully before you spoke, a decision you had to make before all the information was in. A moment where the standard approach had already failed and you had to find another way. You found the way though. That was creativity. And I already know some of you are reacting to that word. If you work in finance, engineering, law, logistics, policy, operations, you may have already moved on mentally. You've checked out. Creativity is not for you. Well, creativity feels like it belongs to someone else. The designer, the musician, the person who went to art school. Here's what I want to put on the table for you to consider. Creativity is the most misread professional skill of our time. The people who are most certain it has nothing to do with them are often the people who would benefit most from developing that skill. Let me start by dismantling the version of creativity most of us have inherited. The version that lives in art rooms and recording studios, the version that's a personality trait, something innate, either you have it or you were born without it. The version that has nothing to do with spreadsheets, courtrooms, or operating theaters. That version is wrong. Creativity is how you think. Specifically, it's the ability to generate, connect, and apply ideas to real problems. I'll say that again slowly for you. It's the ability to generate, connect, and apply ideas. Every one of those is a learnable skill. Every one of them is already happening in your work. The question is whether you're doing it deliberately or by accident. Here's a catalyst idea I want to build on. So in chemistry, a catalyst changes the rate of a reaction. It does not get consumed. It does not replace the raw materials. It changes what those materials can do together. I think creativity does that in human systems. Two people walk into the same room, same problems, same resources, same constraints. One of them finds a way forward. The other circles the same ground. The difference is rarely about intelligence or even experience. It is how they are thinking about the problem in front of them. I want to bring this into three areas: the personal, the professional, and the social space. Let's start with personal. Personal creativity is how you work with your own experience. Think about a difficult moment, a setback, a plan that collapsed, something that did not go the way you expected. Two people can go through something very similar and come out in completely different places. One person carries it as evidence that the door is closed. The other carries it as data that helps them adjust course. Same experience, very different outcome. The difference is in interpretation, and interpretation is a creative act. There's a concept in cognitive psychology called reappraisal. Now, this is the ability to consciously reconstruct the meaning of an event. It is one of the most well-evidenced tools in emotional regulation. At its core, it's creative work. You are generating a different reading of what happened. You are connecting that reading to a different set of possible actions. You are applying it to move. Generate, connect, apply. The question I've come back to in my own hardest moments is a simple one. What am I going to do with this? That question opens something, and the capacity to ask it with intention is a skill, one that you can build. Now, let's move on to the professional space. Let me take you into a few different rooms. Say you're a senior lawyer and you're reviewing a contract dispute. There's no clean precedent. The facts do not map onto existing case law. And you now have to construct an argument from adjacent principles, maybe anticipate how the opposing counsel will think, build a frame that makes the position both coherent and defensible. That is creative thinking. Or say you're a logistics manager dealing with a supply chain failure, a key route is blocked, deadlines are live, the standard options are gone, and you've now got to assemble a combination of alternatives that has not been tried before in this configuration. So you've got to weigh partial solutions and build something workable from the pieces available. That's also creative thinking. Or say you're a policy analyst that's redesigning public services that are currently failing the users. The data points one direction, the people experiencing the service describe something completely different. So now you've got to hold both pictures simultaneously. You've got to find an intervention that addresses what the data cannot fully see. This is also creative thinking. And yes, finally, medicine. A patient presents with fatigue, weight loss, and pain that shifts location. There's no single obvious explanation. You hold multiple hypotheses at once. You decide which information will be most decisive. You move through uncertainty toward a plan, knowing the plan may need to change. That is creative thinking. So none of these examples might necessarily describe themselves as creatives in their line of work. Every one of them is doing creative work every single day. The problem is simple. When creativity goes unnamed, it also goes undeveloped. You can't strengthen something you do not know you are using. There's one specific move that separates people who are good at their work from people who change their field. It is the ability to step outside the current frame and ask a different question. A business is losing customers. Most teams ask, how do we improve what we're already doing? A sharper question, have we been solving the wrong problem entirely? And that shifts the whole picture. It is a creative act and it is trainable. Now, let's shift over to the social dimension. This is where creativity moves beyond the individual and starts to operate in systems. Think about what happens when you build a room with intention. An engineer, a social worker, a data scientist, a community organizer, each person carries a different mental model, a different vocabulary for problems, a different set of assumptions about what is fixable and what is not. When those models meet, something happens that does not happen in homogeneous rooms. Ideas combine in ways that were not available to any single person. Solutions emerge that no one discipline would have reached working alone. Researchers call this cognitive diversity. The evidence behind it is strong. Groups with diverse thinking styles consistently outperform homogeneous ones on complex problems. The most significant advances in any field tend to come from the edges, from people who moved across disciplines and brought a way of thinking with them. The architect behind the Sydney Opera House trained as an engineer. Ada Lovelace wrote what many considered the first computer algorithm. She was also a mathematician raised by a poet. John Snow mapped a cholera outbreak in 1854 by thinking like a geographer, not a physician. He found the source not by treating patients, but by drawing a map. So the space between fields is where new things get built. I felt this in my own work. Music gave me a way of listening I could not have developed through clinical training alone. Clinical work gave me a tolerance for sitting in uncertainty, and that changed how I lead. Leadership work gave me language for things I've always sensed but could not articulate. None of these domains was sufficient on its own. It was a combination that produced something that any one of them alone could not. I want to say something specific about what creative leadership actually looks like. I don't think it's about being unconventional for its own sake. It's not just kind of like big ideas with no follow through, and it certainly shouldn't just be performative. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most creative leaders of the 20th century, and he understood that argument alone was not enough to move people. He understood that transformation happens when people can see and feel a different possibility. So he used language as a tool, rhythm, image, narrative. He made people experience a different world before it had been built. That is creativity at the highest level of leadership. You do not have to be a preacher or a poet to do that work. You do have to understand that your role as a leader includes moving people, and that moving people requires so much more than just raw analysis. Creative leaders ask better questions. They frame problems in ways that open options rather than just closing the doors. They build environments where other people can think well. And they know when to hold a structure and when to let it breathe. These are skills, and they develop through practice, exposure, and honest reflection. And I believe they're available to anyone willing to do that work. I want to bring this back to you directly, my listener. Thank you for your attention so far. Where in your professional life are you applying the same approach you've always used and getting less back from it each time? Take a moment with that. One area, work, a relationship, a decision you've been circling, a problem you have framed the same way for months. What would it look like to approach that differently? You do not need a complete plan. You need a shift in how you're seeing the situation. Creativity expands your options. When your options expand, then your actions can change. And when your actions change consistently, your direction changes. And that is the catalyst at work. In the next episode, I'm going to bring on a guest to talk a bit more about this. And we'll continue to build conversations with people who are effectively building their own lanes across different fields and making decisions worth talking about. If this connected with you, pass it on to somebody who's decided that creativity has nothing to do with them, and hopefully we can change their minds together. This is the LEADr Podcast. Thank you for listening.